and gentlemen, may I please introduce JLenora Bresler.
All of life is about relationships. Amen? Amen? But we don't always have the kind of relationships we want. Is that also true? Yes. And we sometimes look with some envy at those people and teams and maybe even families that we think have that which we do not. And we may even ask them, to what do you owe and attribute this synergy that you seem to have on your team or in your family? And sometimes we get the answers, oh, it's because we know each other so well. You know, we've been together so long. And that can make you feel a little bit discouraged because you may think, oh no, you mean I've got to wait for 10, 20 years before I can have great relationships? Well, I'm here to tell you, no, my friends, you can have them instantly. Instantly. Hence why we call it instant insight. That's right. The Bible says you have not because you ask not. And I know there's spiritual connotations to that, but I believe there's also some deep relationship truth there as well. And what we're going to do today is we're going to look at 15 things that if you know this about a person, you can coach them, you can persuade them, motivate them, encourage them, work with them, marry them if you want to. Whatever you want to do with them. Now, here's the thing, though. We are fighting a bit against human nature because it is human nature to do something very bad for relationships. In fact, the death knell, the real problem about relationships is that we assume things. You know the old joke about what assuming makes out of you and me, right? Okay. And so we go into most of our relationships, frankly, on a trial and error basis. We make errors and put everybody through a lot of trials, okay? So we're not going to do that. We're going to actually ask people questions, and the insight that we get from those answers will give us absolutely instant insight into how to work with them. Sound good? That's the plan. Now, there are 15 of these questions that I've put together. Now, the first thing I want you to know is there's no magic to the order in which they go, with two exceptions. The most important are the first and the last. So if you're in a situation where you don't have time or it just doesn't feel appropriate to grill somebody with 15 questions, go for the biggest impact. Go for the first and the last. If there are certain aspects in which you're dealing with a person, for example, if you're their coach and you're trying to teach them something, then you're going to notice that there's certain questions that will be more relevant to that aspect. But in general, the first and the last give you the biggest bang for your buck, so to speak. Now, the other thing I want to tell you is people think they're so complicated, don't we? We like to think we are so complex. We simple. We are simple. A lot of times when I do these questions, sometimes I'll have someone say, well, you know, it depends on the situation. And that's true to some extent, but let's just agree to something. Most people are like toothpaste tubes. They just keep squirting out. They cannot help themselves, okay? And whatever context you put them in or what environment, they usually default to a particular way that they grew up or their personality or their work experience. Is this not true? You've seen it. You've heard the saying leopards cannot change their spots. I have seen a few leopards change their spot, but you know what? I can still see the shadow of the spots, right? Okay. So with that, we're about to start with one last thing I want to say. I know there are some of you in here right now. You're thinking, 15 questions. Where's my handout? I want my handout. Right? Want to follow along. I didn't give you a handout. Because you know why. If you had a handout in front of you right now, what would you be doing? You'd be reading ahead. You would be sinning against me by stealing my thunder. And I wish to remove that temptation from you. And therefore, Have no fear. The handout is here. But it will be given to you on the way out. All right? Is that okay? So just relax, enjoy, and get involved with us as we look at these 15 questions to great relationships, both personal and professional. Here we go. Number 1 on the board. What 3 words would you like people to use to describe you? Now notice something. I didn't ask what 3 words are people currently using to describe you. That may be a whole different ball game, right? That's a whole nother deal. But if you were to overhear people talking about you, you eavesdrop a little bit, all right? And you were to hear them say, he or she is blank, blank, and blank. What 3 words would mean the most to you? You'd be so excited, say, oh, I'm so glad they think that about me. Now, I'm going to ask you to turn to a partner in just a moment and answer that, but please do it from a professional standpoint. In other words, don't say, well, I want him to think I'm a good mama or a good daddy or something like that. Let's talk about somebody looking at you from a professional standpoint. What would mean the most to you for them to say? I'd be getting talking. Go. All right. Now, this tells you so much because in 3 little words, somebody has told you what success looks like, feels like, and smells like to them. And so they become both predictable and able to be motivated. Let me show you what I mean. Let's take an easy example. Let's say that you use this question in an interview process. You've got 2 applicants. Applicant number 1 says, well, I'd like to be thought of as honest, responsible, respectful. Anything wrong with those traits? Traits devoutly to be wished in anyone. Person number 2 says, I'd like to be thought of as creative, innovative, maybe even a bit avant-garde. Anything wrong with those traits? Not unless you want him to be your accountant. Creative financing may not be what you're going for. Or it may be, I don't know. But we won't talk about that. But now you might be sitting there thinking, but JLenora, somebody can take a job, for example, that really doesn't fit them and still do a good job. Well, of course they can. Many of us have. It's called needing to eat, right? You do what you got to do. But remember what I told you about people being like toothpaste tubes. They keep squirting out. So if you hired the innovative, creative accountant, at a minimum, what can you predict he's going to want to do with your forms? Change them, revamp them, which may be fine, but you may need to coach him that, you know what? Don't just go off and do that change by yourself. We're in a very bureaucratic, hierarchical kind of organizational structure that actually needs you to get allies and go through the proper channels. True? Mm-hmm. So you can coach someone for success. You can predict where they may run afoul of things and keep them from making those mistakes. Now, the other thing is they become very predictable. Very easy to motivate because they're predictable. For example, let's say you hire Mr. Innovative, Creative, okay, to be your accountant. And then a couple years down the road, your company decides that you want to have a member of every department be a part of a strategic planning team to look at what radical changes do we need to bring to the company in order to stay relevant and sustainable. Do you think you'll have any difficulty getting him to join that team?
No.
No, you're going to go up to him and you're going to say, I know you want to be perceived and seen and acknowledged as innovative and creative and avant-garde. And here is an opportunity not only to get to be those things, but to be praised and acknowledged for exactly the things that mean the most to you about success. And that, my friends, is how you give people job satisfaction. Satisfaction is not about just enjoying what you do. It's really not about that at all. If you do enjoy what you do, that's gravy. That's great. But job satisfaction is when you are participating in something that is meaningful to you. And meaning is like beauty. It's in the what? Eye of the beholder. And it's very different. And this gives you an insight into that powerful, powerful question. 3 little rinky-dink words. So shall we go on and see what else we can know about people? All right, let's do it. Let me ask a question. How many of you in this room have ever had responsibility for writing a survey or asking people questions? Anybody? Okay, I'm seeing several. All right, I want to talk to just you all right? When you ask people questions, do they lie? Yeah. Yes, they do. And for a variety of reasons. So because question number 1 is so important, we got to be sure we're getting the straight, right? That we know what they're saying is really the truth. So for those of you that have written surveys, don't you often ask another question? It's called a check question. It comes at the same information slightly differently. And the idea, of course, is if the person told the truth on the first question, then their answer to the second question will be what? It'll be consistent, the same. Question number 2 is a check question to question 1, but it does give you additional information as well. Let's see what I mean. What is the greatest compliment that either has been or could be paid to you? Now, if the person has told you the truth about those things that they would like to be perceived as, then when they answer this question, whatever they say should have to do with what? One of those 3 things. And if they don't, your antenna goes up. Inconsistent. And we need to delve a little bit deeper. But it is more than just a check. It gives you additional information. Because if you look at this question, there's an option on how people can answer, is there not? They can answer how? A real compliment they've been given, or some made-up thing that they'd love to get. Now let's talk about human nature. We're human beings. We're kind of experts on this, are we not? If you have received a compliment that really meant something to you, and you have an option, are you going to tell me about the real compliment, or are you going to talk about some hypothetical one? The real one, right? So if someone chooses to tell you about a made-up one, what does that tell you? They have not gotten. They have not gotten the real meaningful one. Now, what does that tell you? Well, there's 2 options there. Either they haven't gotten it because they haven't deserved it. So now we may have someone who's living on denial, and it isn't just the river in Egypt, right? They may not understand. They may not have good perception about their true self. Or it may be that they did deserve it, but they simply have not grown up in a family, perhaps, or in a work environment where those aspects that meant the most to them have been recognized and appreciated. True? Now, you might say, well, this is interesting, JLenora, but what do I do with this? Well, say you are the supervisor of someone like this. You may need to talk to them about the whole concept of feedback. Because if someone has not received positive feedback that was meaningful to them, that's the key, meaningful to them, then they may have a very warped view of employee-employer feedback. True? For example, have you ever run into someone who says, you know what, if the boss is coming, it's got to be bad news? And they said, no news is good news from the boss. This is someone who has not had the blessing, and those of us who've had great bosses, great supervisors, who've given us positive feedback, we know it is a blessing. They've not had that, so they don't know how to handle it. And they may be very jaded. And when you come as a supervisor, trying with a sincere heart to give positive, constructive, helpful, positive, uplifting feedback, they may go, what do you really want? What's really going on here? Why are you buttering me up? What's this about? And they may not realize your genuineness. So you may have to have a discussion with them. And this kind of lets you know about that. So this is a great check question, but also gives you insight into how they view feedback. And I got to tell you, family members need feedback too. Amen? Amen. We won't ask my family who's in the audience. Amen? No, we won't. What is one misunderstanding people may have about you? Now, this is a very interesting question. And I do want you to take just 15 or 20 seconds, turn to a partner and answer that. What is a misunderstanding that you think people may have about you? Go. All right. Now, frankly, it may surprise you that seems like such an intimate question to ask someone, but it's not awkward at all. People instantly start talking. It's very interesting. And I think the reason that there's no hesitation is because you're giving them that it's a what? Misunderstanding. So you're saying, look, we're not saying that this is really you. We're saying that people misunderstand you, and people are much more likely to talk about that. Now, this is fascinating because, first of all, whatever they say is interesting. Sometimes people start telling you about a misunderstanding, and you're thinking secretly it ain't no misunderstanding. They got you now. But regardless of that, it shows you something else, because how does a person get an understanding that there is a misunderstanding about them? What have they obviously received? Right. And so you see, it's not that you're listening so much for what they say, how they answer, or what they answer, but how they answer. Let me give you an example. Let's say you have two people and you ask this question. Person number one says, well, I think people think I'm a little arrogant, a little cocky, a little full of myself. I don't know why that would be. I've just been everywhere, done everything. Everybody else just pretty much pales in comparison. And so, I got to be honest. Now, person number two says, well, I think sometimes that people think I'm a little arrogant, maybe a little cocky, a little full of myself, and I've thought about that. I get very excited about stuff, and I just kind of get, I rave on and on about things, and I think sometimes people misperceive that, so sometimes I try to tone it down a little bit. Now, of the two people, A and B, who probably actually may have a struggle with arrogance and at least self-preoccupation? It's actually both. It's actually both. But who would you clearly rather work with? B. Because what their answer has shown you is that they can what? Accept feedback, look at it objectively, not just dismiss it out of hand, but can actually analyze it. They may not always agree with it, but they can at least analyze it. How many of you want to be in a professional or a personal relationship with someone who just cannot hear, cannot accept any feedback? No, nobody wants to be in that, right? No, you don't. Right, yeah, all right, you do not want to. I do not want to be. You don't either, right? And so this is another opportunity to show you, okay, how is someone going to react when they get that negative feedback, even if it's what? Undeserved, even if they ultimately think it's unjustified, because that happens too in life, does it not? And it can turn people very bitter, and it can really hurt them. And you need to know, is this someone who can stand up under that? What is your prime working time? This has nothing to do with prime TV time, okay? Nothing to do with it. Biologically, there are about 3 to 5 hours of every day where you are at your best. Your intellectual, your physical, your creative best. You may have never heard it called prime time, but you know what I'm talking about because you say things like, I'm just not a morning person. Now, this is very helpful because you can, to the extent that your work life will allow or your personal life will allow, you can schedule things to occur when you are at your best or when a other person is at their best. Let me give you an example. If you need at work, let's say, to have somebody really engage, maybe it's going to be an awkward conversation. There might be, you need someone who's not going to be like flying off the handle. They need to be at the best of their best, okay? You would want them to be a part of that conversation during their prime working time, true? Their prime working time. You do not want to get them at a time when they are not at their best. On the other hand, most people are getting a lot of work done during their prime working time, right? So do they want to see your happy little face just show up and your feet up on their desk at that time? No. So they're willing to give you some of that precious time, but only if you've kind of scheduled it ahead. True? So you know this. You can also use this with teams. Let me give you an example. We'll do this quickly. I want 4 people to tell me what during office time do they think is their prime working time. Yes. What would you say?
Midday, so from 11 to 2.
11 to 2, and your name is?
Renee.
Renee. All right, give me another one.
9 to 12.
9 to 12 in the morning, and where is it? All right, and you are? Okay. Okay. And then somebody, yes, sir.
And it's 7:30 to 10.
7:30 to 10, and one more. Yes, sir.
David, 2 p.m. to 5 p.m.
2 to 5. Okay. Afternoon. Now, let's say that's our team. We have to send a representative of our team to a group meeting for the organization, and nothing really is going to happen. We don't expect to have to speak. We don't expect anybody's going to try to pull the wool over anybody, but we have to send someone to sit and take minutes. Okay? Now, if that meeting is, say, at 11 o'clock, who do we not want to send?
Yeah, we don't want to send Renee because she's prime working time.
That's right. We're not going to send Renee or Kay, because if we do, and they're sitting there in that meeting bored out of their minds, what are they thinking? Do you know what I could be doing? Do you know how much time this is wasting? Now, the meeting may actually be only an hour, but to them it's the equivalent of 2 or 3 because of how much they could get done. But on the other hand, if we think something important's going to happen at that meeting, then who do we want to send? Our people who are in their prime working time. Prime working time. How many of you have children? Right, okay. And you were children as well. How many of you had parents who said to you, do your homework right after school? Okay. And what class did they tell you to start with? Whatever was your most difficult. Now, did they mean well?
Yeah.
Of course they did. But if your prime working time wasn't 3 to 5 in the afternoon, they told you wrong. If your prime working time was 8 o'clock at night, when should you have been doing that math? I made an assumption it was math, right? When were you should have been doing it in what? Your prime working time, right? What is your crunch time? No, it is not 2:30 in the afternoon when you search your desk desperately for leftover M&Ms and potato chips and anything that you might crunch to get through. No. Your crunch time is every job has, and every life for that matter, has certain times, does it not, when you are under the gun, in the sense of there is an immediate deadline. Maybe there's a report for you that's due every Thursday at 4 o'clock. Well, your crunch time for that report would then be what? Thursday afternoon, right? Probably. Now, my question to you is this. Do the people that work around you and live around you know when those crunch times are? Because let me tell you, if you've been married, you know the truth. You get a different response depending on the timing. Can I get a witness? And it's true, not just with spouses, but with anybody. And if someone is in a crunch time and you need them or you want to talk to them, they may be very happy to talk to you any other time, but not right then. Do they know those? So can they avoid you, or if, frankly, or which is a great blessing, right? Please just stay out of my hair for a moment. Or if not, they can at least be what? Be quick, be brief. Now, that's really a question about communication. You know, how well does your family and your colleagues know about your crunch times? Now, some of you may say, well, yeah, my office staff, they know that I have that report on Thursdays, and they've kind of learned. But you know, sometimes Wednesdays are not supposed to be any big day, and you walk in and bam, you're in a crunch time. You're in an unexpected crunch time. Your team needs to have a visual, and I'm not talking about an upturned finger or something, okay? A visual sign that can alert the rest of the group, hey, I'm in an unexpected time. I'm in an unexpected crunch time. I've seen people in cubicles take that yellow and black crime scene tape. I've seen them go to the office, the dollar store. You know, never underestimate, by the way, the worth of the dollar store. It's a great place. They'll stick with those little plastic flags in the crevice of their cubicle. If the flags are flying, don't be coming in. In a warehouse or a plant kind of environment, I've seen people wear baseball caps turned differently. You know, if I've turned the bill to one side, that means I'm in a crunch time. So think about what you might do to have that visual symbol that would alert people that I'm in a crunch time. And people are usually very happy to be your allies in this, but they've got to have information, right? They got to have information. How many of you have ever taken Myers-Briggs, True Colors, DISC, any of those personality assessments? Okay, then you are going to love the next 4 questions, because a lot of this is kind of goes along some of the same type of ideas. Very, very critical. I'm all for those. I think they're great, but if you don't have the time or the money for them, you can kind of cut to the chase, because people generally do know themselves. All right, you just need to ask them. How do you learn best? People generally learn one of 3 ways. They're what? Visual, auditory, or kinesthetic. Do you know how the people you are trying to teach, to coach, including your children as well as your employees, do you know how they best learn? If you're not savvy to this, how are you going to teach? In what style?
Whatever is best for you.
Exactly. And you know what? People ain't like you. They ought to be, I know, but they're not all. And we make assumptions too. We look and we think we see the way they learn, but you don't see what all they do. So you may be making a very false assumption. So I'm just going to ask you, turn to a partner right now and tell them, how do you learn best? You've learned all your life, you know. Tell them. All right. How many of you, by a show of hands, are visual learners? Raise your hand. All right. How many of you are auditory? Okay. Look, very much fewer people. And kinesthetic or hands-on? Okay, a lot of people in the room. Okay. You need to teach to the style that the person it does best. So those of us that are auditory, you repeat yourself. It's fine. They don't mind that. Don't be repeating yourself to a visual. They're going to think somebody's slow around here. Either you slow because you forgot you done told me this, or they're going to say, you're saying it because you think I dumb. I didn't get it the first time. Neither one is conducive to good relationship. But the visual wants the PowerPoints and the screensavers and the follow-up emails. And the kinesthetics don't mind the supervisor standing over them as they learn something, right? A visual person will be like, get away from me. Get away from me, right? Oh, we've hit the mother lode now. How do you like to be recognized? Survey after survey after survey says people react better and love to be recognized. But recognition is different for different people, true? Now, I know some of you haven't known me for very long, but I bet you could make some pretty smart assumptions about me. if I'd done something worthy of acclaim, how do you think I'd like to be recognized? How many people can we fit in this room? And we go have us a party. And in the shake of the night, when everyone's there, you're going to put me up on a stage where I so clearly belong. And regale everyone with my glories. And then you're going to say, speech, speech, so I can get up and thank everybody, right? Now, about 18 years ago, I had a woman working with me on a team that I adored, and I wanted to recognize her. So you know what I did? I done unto others as I had done unto me. I took my personal money, not corporate coffers, my personal money, and I threw her a party and literally put her on a stage and told everyone how great she was and watched the woman wilt. Now, I thought she was just overcome with the grandeur of the moment. Next morning, we were very close. She was a little reserved. I let it go for as long as I could, about 20 minutes. Then I went up to the ingrate, and I said, woman, what's your problem? I did everything. I've recognized you publicly. That was my money that threw that party. You realize that, right? Okay. And she looked at me with all the love she could muster at the moment. She said, JLenora, I'm sure you what? Meant well. But I'd have rather had a letter in my personnel file and a gift certificate to Macaroni Grill. And I said, what? You give me a letter that God knows if anyone's ever going to read, and you give me a gift certificate to a restaurant my husband can well afford to take me to, and you call it recognition? I think not. But what did I forgot? It wasn't about me. Most things in life are, but on this rare occasion, it was not about me. And so you've got to recognize people in the manner they want. Kouzes and Posner are two middle-aged men who have done some wonderful research around the world about how managers and employees view things. And a tremendous number, like 77% of employees say they're not getting any recognition. And yet they talk to those very people's managers, and half of them think they're masters at it. Now, who's lying? Nobody's lying. It's a matter of what? Perception. On a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being I ain't got a clue, 10 I'll bet the farm. How confident are you know the recognition preferences of your employees? Just shout out a number. All right, come on. 3, 4, 5, 7. Is there any reason we can't all be at 10? You ask them. You ask them. All right. Every time you open your mouth, you're probably annoying somebody. Yes. Some of you saying, yeah, you're right on it, woman, right now with me. This question, when receiving information, do you generally prefer detail or summary, is key to this. Y'all, you need to think about this. Every person you interact with is like a little antenna walking around, a little radio station trying to tune into their favorite radio station. They're not looking for a particular song. They're looking for a particular genre of music. And you're the music. And you want to be sure that you're playing the communication, whatever you're saying to them, in the style they like. Now, I'm not talking about classical versus pop versus, rap music here. I'm talking about how they like to be talked to. Some people are on the extreme. They're very detailed. And your credibility is established with them because you have a command of the details. And if anything you say turns out to be wrong, woo, they're going to turn off that station. And because, this person doesn't know what they're talking about. They got that wrong and get everything else wrong. On the other hand, some of us are very big picture people. We want to be talked to in more broad kind of ways. And if I need the detail, I'll what? I'll ask you for it. Now, this is absolutely critical. And people tell you how they want to be talked to all the time. The question is, are you paying attention? Let me show you how this works. You're telling a tale. Blah, 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 blah. A detail person is stopping you, asking you what? Questions. What, where, when? There were a lot of people there today. Really, how many? He really likes you. What exactly did he say? Right? On the other hand, you're telling a tale to a big picture person and blah, 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 and they're interrupting you saying, could you just... Cut to the chase, get to the point. Now, just like a radio station, you know how every once in a while the radio announcer comes on and says, this is WK whatever, America's modern country music. Why do they do that? To identify what's coming, right? So not only do you want to give people messages in the way they want it, but let them know, just like with the radio identification, that that's how you're going to talk to them, because that gets their attention. They tune into you. I don't care how eloquent a speaker you are. If nobody's listening to you, the gig is up. Okay, you got to get them. So here's what you do. I go up to a big picture person and I say, I'm not going to bore you with the details. I'm not going to mire you down in the minutia. Here's the bottom line. I'm cutting to the chase. This is what I need you to do. Oh, look, she's smiling. Oh, she's got shivers running up and down her body. She's so excited. You want to know what'll get shivers going in a detailed person? You say, I got your comprehensive data right here, baby. This can have a huge impact on your career. Because think about it. If you're working for someone who is a big picture person and you are very detailed, the big picture person may say, they're not leadership material because they get mired down. They can't see what's important. They're too busy looking at the trees. They don't see the forest. On the other hand, if it's the other way and you are a big picture person working for a detailed leader, they may discount you as leadership because they may say, this person is too lazy. They don't take care to have a command of the precise things, and so things are falling through the cracks. This is important, is it not? Very, very important. In what environment are you most creative? Some of us need to talk in order to think. No talky, no thinky. It's as simple as that. We call them brainstormers. If you're a brainstormer and there's an issue, there's a problem, your first inclination is what? Call a meeting. Because you know who attends meetings? People. And you know what people do? They talk. And I don't care what they say. If there was a lot of talking, a brainstormer says there was a lot of thinking going on. That was a good meeting. Now, some of you in this room are reflectors. So when the brainstormer comes up to you and says, give me your gut feeling on this. Give me your initial impression. Let me think about it. Give me the stuff and let me get back to you. You know what a brainstormer thinks? Must not have anything to think because got nothing to say. And the reflector's saying, and if you would engage brain before engaging mouth, we wouldn't have to hear all the craziness until you come eventually to the right answer. I can't tell you how many meetings I've seen go astray about this because brainstormers misinterpret reflectors. If I'm a brainstormer, that probably doesn't shock any of you. So a lot of times my initial inclination is, okay, get everybody together. Let's hash this out. So who's a brainstormer in here? All right, and your name is?
Natalie.
Natalie, okay. So let's say that I throw something out on the table. I say, oh, everybody, we need to cut costs or we need to come up with a great idea. Natalie is going to start talking. Now, has Natalie had time to think it all through and think about all the different things that could go wrong? No. So no offense, dear, but what comes out of your mouth is, well, somewhat nutty. Okay? But nobody cares because the other brainstormers know you're editing on the fly. So who's another brainstormer in here? Give me. All right, you are? Monica. So Monica says, Natalie, most of that was gobbledygook, but you know, there was a seed of a good idea in there. And then you jump in and I jump in, Natalie's back, we just get going. It's a great meeting, ain't it? It's great, a lot of talking. Now, who's a reflector in here? And you are? Chris. Chris, be honest. Tell us on behalf of reflectors everywhere, what do you really think of us? Did you hear the stupidity coming out of her mouth? If she'd have thought for a moment, right? And the rest didn't seem to care. They just loved her. They ate it up, right? And yet we look at somebody who is quiet then and think, well, do they not care? Do they not understand what's going on? So we're shocked when 2 weeks later at the next staff meeting, here you come with color-coordinated blueprints. She's thought it all out. She cares and has a brain. Who'd have known it? It's great. It's great, right? So how many of you are like, you're laughing because you know this is true? It's true. It's true. Now, what if you need the reflectors to engage early? It's simple. Give them the information early. You can give the brainstormers the information too. If there's no one to talk to, they won't read it or do anything with it. But to be fair, give it all. How do you choose to live? Some people like structure, they like routine. And frankly, they even choose jobs like that so that they pretty much know at 10 o'clock next Tuesday what they're going to be. Others of us would like to be running through a field with a scarf singing, I gotta be free, I gotta be me. We're very much about spontaneity, and usually we choose jobs where, who knows what we're doing tomorrow, right? Have to check the calendar. Where am I gonna be? What am I talking on? But this has to do with you understanding what's gonna motivate people and give them confidence. I'll give you an example. Let's say you have two people and you wanna give a brand new job to them, something that neither one of them has ever done. One is very orderly. They live by two things, the clock and the to-do list. If to an orderly person, if the meeting was to be at 8 o'clock, but it didn't start until 8:10 because we were all munching the donuts, but somebody showed up at 8:05, to the order person, was the 8:05 arrival late? Yes. But even though somebody else would say, but it didn't what? It didn't really matter. But to them, they were late. Order people love the accomplishment of checking off done, done, done on a to-do list. In fact, if they don't have a to-do list for the day, they'll write down what they wrote, what they had to do yesterday, so they get the joy of checking it off again. Some of you doing that, I know. Now, so think about this. You've got a person like that, and you've got another person who wants a lot of freedom. Don't fence me in could be their theme song, okay? You're wanting them to do something new. Order and freedom. Who would be very inspired by this? I know this is the first time you've ever done it, but I've got templates and samples, and I've got people that have done it before that you can call. Order or freedom? Who's going to want that to hear that? Order. They're going to love that. Who's going to like having to sit down with you for interim status updates? The order. Who's going to want to be told, look, here's your drop dead date. If you got any questions, call me. Freedom. Okay? Who's going to want to say, look, put your own mark on it. Make it your own baby. Absolutely. You can get people who are very different to do the same task. You just focus on what? Very different aspects of it. Everybody likes to think they make good decisions, but the truth is, we do prize the way we make decisions. Some of us tend more to be logic, like Mr. Spock from Star Trek, or Joe Friday from the old Dragnet. Just the facts, ma'am, right? Only the facts, very logic. Others of us are more feeling, in the sense of like, we do care what other people think and how other people are going to view it and perceive what we do. And we do care about how are other people going to be affected by it. Now, a lot of people say, well, I'm both. Well, I hope so. If you're not, you're going to be really nuts. But the truth is, you're going to tend to skew one way or another. And if you're not sure, let me tell you how to know that. Think about one of the hardest decisions you've ever had to make. When the proverbial pros and cons were about identical. What was the factor that finally pushed you over? Was it something that had to do with logic, feasibility, efficiency, legally defensible? Or was it something that had to do with how other people were going to be affected, or even how you were going to be affected? Sometimes we do the wrong thing, but it feels so good. You know, or do you kind of go with that sometimes? That'll tell you. How many of you have ever had this situation? You're trying to persuade someone of something, and you're brilliant. You're thinking, man, I'm convincing myself all over again how right I am, and yet you're not breaking through. The person is not agreeing, and you're just getting so frustrated. You're thinking, how can anybody with a brain not agree with this? May I suggest that you're probably arguing from what? Your side of this. And so you need to flip it and start arguing from the opposite. If you're talking about logic and practicality and all of that, go to the other for a little bit and see if you don't get a little bit of a change. What is your pet peeve? Oh, let's shout out some business-related pet peeves. What people that are late, people that are dishonest, incompetence. Give me some more.
Entitled.
People that feel entitled. What else? Anybody? Come on. Give me some from the back row.
Self-serving.
Self-serving. Yes. All right. Give me something else.
Not dependable.
Not dependable.
Loud and boisterous or just inconsiderate.
Inconsiderate in a work environment. Okay.
Don't answer their emails.
People that don't answer their emails. All right. Now, did you notice how I didn't have to work very hard for y'all to start giving me that, right? It kind of came out easily. That gives you so much work, so much to work with when you know that, because here's the deal. Every single person wants respect. True? But unfortunately, respect, like other things, like recognition, is in the eye of the beholder. What you find respectful may not be what others do. True? When someone tells you what their pet peeve is, they've given you a window into how they view respect. Because think about it a minute. What is a pet peeve? A pet peeve is something that may look to an outsider a small thing, but it evokes an almost unreasonable, instant, passionate, negative reaction in someone. Well, why would something be so passionately negative? Because it has hit your disrespect button. Now, that may not be what the person meant. They may have had no intention in any way of disrespecting you, but it doesn't matter. That's how you perceived it. And I want you to think about the pet peeves that we just heard. Lateness, for example. Can't that be viewed or couched as disrespect? Because you're inconveniencing someone else regarding something they can't get more of. Once it's gone, you can't get back time. Or, the other things that you all said, every single thing can be seen as respect or disrespect, true? So it gives you a great insight into how you need to deal with people. So if I know, for example, that punctuality is very important to you, then by all means, what am I going to go out of my way to be? Yeah, I'll let somebody else, who doesn't care as much about that, suffer before I'll let him suffer. Because it means so much, because he sees it as a sign of respect. Does this make sense? Absolutely fascinating, isn't it? 13 and 14. Questions 13 and 14 I call bookends. And this is because they talk about what will bring you into a deeper relationship and what will also just halt a relationship. When you think about work, we spend more of our awake and productive time with our coworkers than we do our families. Isn't that true? And I would like to think that there is at least a hope that we could establish good, meaningful, enjoyable relationships with those folks. Appropriate, of course. But I mean, they're such a part of our lives. Some people even call them their work family, right? Their work family. So here's how, if you wish to establish a deeper relationship with someone that you know on a work relationship, or maybe in a civic club or service club, something like that, a professional association, how can you get that deeper relationship if you want to? Here's the two questions you need to ask. What would earn someone your enthusiastic support and loyalty? In other words, as long as what you like and what means something to you is moral and legal, if I want, I could be it for you. I could intentionally try to do that, which would make me appealing to you, right? And then we could have a friendship, or I suppose even a romantic relationship. Enthusiastic support and loyalty, not tolerance, not just general, you're all right, but enthusiastic. I want to support you. I'm loyal to you. Isn't that what you want in relationships? I know it's what I want. I want you to turn to a partner and answer that question. For you, what could someone do that would earn your enthusiastic support and loyalty? Go. All right. Who's willing to tell me something? Who's willing to tell me? What would earn someone? Dependability. All right, give me something else. Because what'd you say? Honesty. Integrity. What else?
Someone who gives you the same respect that you're looking for.
That's an excellent answer because it's the answer I would give. I have no problem with this. You want my enthusiastic support and loyalty? You be enthusiastically supportive and loyal to me. That's how that works. But it can be different, right, for different people. Sometimes it's honesty, and if that is breached, and honesty is lost, even if it's something that's minor, something that's relatively minor. Here we're hearing from the horse's mouth right here. It doesn't matter, does it? Doesn't matter. It's a make or break kind of thing. Which leads to the second question. Things in life happen. I mean, there are misunderstandings, there's difficulties, there's bad times. It is true that sometimes time heals wounds, but it doesn't heal all wounds. How many of us know that's the truth? But it does heal some. You need to know in a relationship that you care about which things you can just kind of kick down the road, let it go, sweep it under the carpet, make light of it, and it'll just kind of go away. And those things that will fester and break a relationship. So here is the safety net, if you will, for a relationship. You need to know the answer to this question. What would cause you to disrespect and dislike a person so much that you would actually end the relationship? But I heard betrayal. Me too, baby. I tell you, if you've betrayed me, we are done. Now, circumstances may require that I still smile and get along with you, but I am intellectually gone. Now, but that's not the way everybody feels. Some people can get past betrayal. But it may be something else for you that is the end, right? And you need to know that about relationships that you care about. So, for example, if you were in a relationship with me, personal or professional, and you said, oh my gosh, something has happened, and you know what? JLenora may perceive this as betrayal. She may think I've betrayed her. You know what you need to do. You've got to come to me and say, JLenora, now something's happened. And you could think this is betrayal, but I want to explain why it's not. That's your only hope. Because otherwise, you've lost me if I find out, right? Right. So, I just beg you in your relationships that matter, that you want to be lifelong and robust, I beg you to have asked that question so that you can make the right decision when things happen. And things will happen, right? Mm-hmm. Things happen. Well, we're about to hit number 15. And I told you that the first and the last were the ones that had the most impact. Mm-hmm. Now, the question I'm about to show you, though, it's very important, but do not ask it unless you have a lot of time to sit and hear the answer. Mm-hmm. Warning. What learning experience has had the biggest impact on you and why? It is always fascinating to hear what people will say. It's absolutely, because let me ask you something. Most lessons in life, are they learned on the mountain or in the valley? In the valley. In the good times or the bad times? So in addition to just being a heck of an interesting story, what this shows you is how people deal with hard times. And hard times will come. You may master all 14 of these questions and set up your relationships to be wonderful. But you know what? Life happens. Okay? And bad times come. And you need to know, how are we dealing with somebody who can see past the moment, the badness, the inconvenience, the unpleasantness, and see something good that can come out of it. Let me give you 2 quick examples. One was had to do with Thomas Edison, the wizard. Remember, the great genius that invented so many things. As an older man, he was interviewed by a young, smart alecky little whippersnapper magazine newspaper guy. And he said very cattily to Mr. Edison, says, "So, Mr. Edison, how does it feel to have failed over 2,500 times to find the proper filament for the light bulb?" Mr. Edison pulled himself up, pulled his coat across his chest and said, "My dear young man, I've never failed one time in my life. I conducted over 2,500 successful experiments in what not to use as the filament for the light bulb." There's also a true story. I cannot remember the man's name, or I would give him credit. But it's a very famous story. An IBM executive back in the 60s, when IBM was the big blue, and it was the absolute epitome of American business success. And he was a relatively young executive, and he made a stupid mistake. Just really, it was not even smart. It was dumb. And he cost the company $1 million in a single day. And that's when $1 million meant something. He went to his office. He wrote out his resignation letter and waited for the call he knew would come. It came. "You're wanted in the CEO's office." He took his resignation letter, his hat, literally in his hand. Gentlemen, this is in the days when men wore hats, right? He went up to the CEO's office, put the resignation letter on the desk and said, "Sir, I'm so sorry. I will go quietly." The CEO jumped up and said, "You're not going anywhere. You are now the most expensively trained employee in the history of IBM. I just paid $1 million for your education, my friend. You're not going anywhere." And the story goes, of course, that he stayed with IBM for his whole career and did brilliantly. When you ask this question, that's what you're listening for. You want to hear someone like Edison or like that CEO who can see beyond the moment and the badness and maybe even the plain mistake, stupidity of the moment, and see that that can be the gateway to enlightenment and better times. And I'm going to say something very bold to you. If you ever ask this question and the person you're talking to cannot instantly start talking, have absolutely nothing to do with them. Don't hire them, and for God's sake, don't marry them. Because I'll tell you what it's showing you. Most people have no trouble talking about this. The fact is, you're going to have a hard time shutting them up. Because what? We have so many examples, so many lessons that we have learned. If you ever have someone who cannot start talking about that, what you're dealing with is a person who is very shallow, who has not been introspective in their life, who has not asked the overarching questions like, why am I here? What am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to learn? And that is not someone that you need around you. True? Mm-hmm. True. And so, my friends, I leave you with this. Start asking questions. People are willing to tell you. Mm-hmm. And then whether you want good relationships in the boardroom or in the staff room or in the living room or in any other room, you are maybe just 15 questions away from great relationships. Thank you very much.